The last head count. The wind through the pines of the Absaroka Range did not blow. It rattled like dry teeth. Scoutmaster Tom checked his watch by the dim glow of his headlamp, 9:42 p.m. They were 6 miles deep into a dead-end glacial valley, far past where the marked trails of western Montana dissolved into shale and deadfall. Behind him, 8 boys, aged 12 to 15, trudged in a silent, exhausted line. Assistant Scoutmaster Gary brought up the rear, his heavy flashlight beam cutting erratic arcs through the dense timber. "Keep the pace, boys," Tom called out, though his own boots felt filled with lead. "We hit the clearing by the ridge, we pitch camp, and we cook, eyes on the pack in front of you." Near the front of the line, 14-year-old Toby kept his head down. He was a quiet kid, skinny, with a habit of staring a second too long before answering. Next to him, his tentmate Liam was shivering violently despite the steep incline. "Hey," Liam whispered, his voice cracking with the strain of a 30-pound pack. "Did you hear that?" Toby didn't look back. "Hear what?" "Like someone calling my name." From down the ridge. It sounded exactly like my mom. "Your mom is in Billings, Liam," Toby said. His voice was flat, rhythmless. "Keep walking." From the back of the line, Gary's flashlight suddenly danced wildly across the canopy, then dropped to the dirt. "Tom," Gary barked, his voice tight. "Hold up! Stop the line!" The 8 boys slumped onto the damp pine needles, the heavy nylon of their backpacks groaning. Tom jogged back down the trail, his boots crunching on the gravel. Gary was standing at the edge of a steep drop-off, his beam locked onto a massive ponderosa pine. Pressed into the bark, 5 feet off the ground, was a fresh patch of gray fur. It wasn't stuck there by accident, it was wedged deep into a split in the wood, slick with a thick, dark grease that smelled faintly of copper and rotted fat. "An elk?" Tom asked, trying to keep his tone casual for the boys listening in the dark. "An elk doesn't leave skin behind, Tom," Gary muttered, dropping his voice to a harsh whisper. "And an elk doesn't walk on 2 legs. Look at the mud at the base of the trunk." Tom lowered his light. In the soft earth beneath the split bark were 2 deep, elongated impressions. They looked like human feet, but the toes were splayed too wide, the heel pressing down with the weight of something far too heavy to be a man. And right beside them, bleeding into the same track, was the unmistakable print of a wolf's hind paw. "We don't tell the boys," Tom said firmly. "We find the clearing, we build a fire, we keep them contained." By midnight, the camp was set. 4 nylon tents formed a tight semicircle around a roaring fire of dead pine and cedar. The heat was a relief, but the smell of the burning wood couldn't entirely mask the iron scent that seemed to be drifting up from the valley floor. The boys ate their freeze-dried meals in a tense, hushed huddle. The wilderness usually felt vast, but tonight the darkness beyond the firelight felt like a physical wall pressing against them. "All right, head count," Tom announced, standing up and dusting off his canvas trousers. He pointed his finger at each boy in turn. "Ben, Sam, Miller, Leo, Eli, Toby, Liam, Jacob. 8. Gary, you and me make 10. Everyone is here. No one leaves their tent tonight without a buddy and a flashlight." "Understood?" A chorus of tired murmurs answered him. Within 30 minutes, the fire was reduced to glowing red coals, and the boys had zipped themselves into their sleeping bags. Tom and Gary sat on 2 overturned logs, their hunting knives resting openly on their knees. The forest was dead silent, no owls, no crickets. Even the wind had died, leaving the air thick and stagnant. At 2:15 a.m., the silence broke. It started as a low, wet gurgle from the brush 50 yards away. Then a voice emerged from the dark. It was rough, broken, and sounded like a needle skipping on a scratched record. "Keep the pace, boys, eyes on the pack, in front of you." Gary froze, his knuckles turning white around the hilt of his knife. "Tom, that's your voice." "I didn't say anything," Tom whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. The voice from the woods shifted. The pitch slid upward, warping into a sickening mimicry of a child's tone. "Ben." "Sam, Miller, Leo." It was reciting the head count, but the rhythm was wrong. It paused between every name, gasping for air as if the throat producing the sounds didn't have the right anatomy for human speech. Eli, Toby, Liam, Jacob. Then the voice chuckled, a wet rattling sound that ended in a sharp canine bark. "That's it," Gary muttered, standing up and clicking on his high-lumen tactical light. "I'm gonna look." "Gary, no!" Tom lunged to grab his sleeve, but Gary had already stepped past the perimeter of the tents, throwing the bright beam into the thick brush. The light illuminated a massive, horrific silhouette. It stood on 2 legs, but its spine was arched forward at an impossible broken angle. It was wrapped in the mangled hide of a grizzly bear, but the fur was fused directly into the raw, pink flesh beneath it. The face was a nightmare, a human skull stretched thin, the jaw unhinged and hanging open, revealing rows of jagged, human-like teeth coated in black saliva. Its eyes caught the flashlight beam, reflecting a dull, oily yellow. Before Gary could scream, the creature moved. It didn't run. It scampered on all fours with a sickening, arachnid speed. A heavy fur-clad arm slammed into Gary's chest. The impact sounded like a baseball bat hitting a wet mattress. Gary's flashlight flew into the air, spinning wildly and illuminating flashes of blood and gray fur before landing face down in the dirt. A wet tear, a crunch of bone, then silence. Tom didn't hesitate. He blew his emergency whistle, the shrill blast echoing through the canyon. "Out of the tents, now!" Tom roared, rushing to the nearest nylon shelter and ripping the zipper open. "Leave the gear! Run back toward the ridge! Move, move, move!" The boys exploded into the dark, screaming, their bare feet and socks tearing over the sharp rocks. Tom counted them as they ran past him into the gloom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He waited by the dying fire, his knife raised, his eyes scanning the tree line. The brush crackled. "Tom!" a voice cried out from the shadows. It sounded exactly like Gary. "Tom, I'm hurt. Help me up." A figure stumbled into the faint red light of the coals. It wore Gary's plaid shirt and his hiking boots, but the clothes were hanging loosely, as if the body inside them had suddenly shrunk or lost its shape. The arms were too long, the elbows bending slightly backward as it reached out. "Tom, Headcount." The thing grinned, its mouth stretching wide enough to tear the skin at the corners of Gary's stolen lips. Tom turned and ran. He sprinted through the pitch-black woods, guided only by the distant, panicked shouts of the boys ahead. Branch after branch whipped across his face, cutting his cheeks, but he didn't dare slow down. Behind him he could hear the heavy, uneven thuds of something heavy pursuing him, switching seamlessly between the sounds of boots and the frantic scratching of claws. He found the boys huddled against a sheer rock wall at the base of the ridge. They were crying, clinging to each other in the dark. "Is everyone here?" Tom gasped, his lungs burning. He shone his small penlight over the shivering group. "Ben? Here. Sam? Here. Miller? Leo? Eli? Liam? Jacob." He paused. His light flickered over Toby. Toby was standing slightly apart from the rest, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His face was completely calm. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even panting. "Toby, you okay?" Tom asked, his breath ragged. "I'm fine, Scoutmaster," Toby said. His voice was steady, too steady. Before Tom could process the boy's calm, a heavy crash echoed from the trees above them. Another shape dropped from the rocks, landing right in the middle of the huddle. It was the second one. This creature wore the rotting hide of a mountain lion, its long, human-like fingers ending in thick yellow talons. It lunged sideways, its jaws clamping down on Miller's shoulder, lifting the 15-year-old off his feet and dragging him screaming into the dark underbrush. "Run up the ridge!" Tom screamed, shoving the remaining boys toward the narrow, steep rocky chute that led to the upper plateau. "Don't look back!" The ascent was a slaughter. The mountain was their hunting ground. The things knew the terrain perfectly. They didn't just kill, they played with their food. From the shadows of the rocks, voices would call out using the boys' own names, tricking them into turning around right into waiting jaws. Ben slipped on the loose shale. A fur-clad hand reached out from a crevice and pulled him inside like a spider taking a fly. His screams cut off with a sickening wet snap. Sam and Leo tried to hide behind a boulder. Tom watched in horror as the creature wearing Gary's clothes walked right past them, then casually turned its head entirely backward to face them, unhinging its jaw to swallow Leo's face in the dark. Tom fought. He used his knife, burying it into the thick, greasy hide of the bear thing when it tried to grab Eli. The blade sank deep, but the creature didn't bleed red. A thick black oil oozed from the wound, and the thing merely laughed with Tom's own voice before lifting Eli by the waist and hurling him over the cliff edge into the abyss below. By the time Tom scrambled onto the flat, moonlit plateau at the top of the ridge, only 3 of them were left: Tom, Liam, and Toby. The plateau was a barren expanse of gray stone, completely exposed to the freezing mountain wind. There was nowhere left to run. Behind them was a 500-foot drop. Ahead of them was the dark tree line. Liam collapsed onto his knees, vomiting from pure terror, his fingers clutching at Tom's boots. "They're coming, Scoutmaster. They're going to eat us. They're going to take our skin." "Stay behind me, Liam," Tom gasped, holding his bloody knife out. His hands were shaking violently. He looked over at Toby. Toby was standing at the edge of the plateau, looking down at the valley below. The moon was bright now, casting a harsh silver light over his pale face. "Toby, get back from the edge," Tom warned. Toby turned around slowly. The silver moonlight caught his eyes. They weren't brown anymore. They were a dull, oily yellow, reflecting the light like a nocturnal predator. "Why are you shaking, Tom?" Toby asked. The voice was Toby's, but the rhythm was gone. It paused between words, gasping for air. Tom felt the blood drain from his face. He remembered the head count by the fire. He remembered Toby standing apart from the boys. He remembered Toby never panting, never crying, never running out of breath. "When did they get you, Toby?" Tom whispered, his voice cracking. "Was it before we even left the trail, on the ridge?" Toby smiled, his jaw unhinged with the soft, wet pop, shifting his chin down toward his neck. His teeth looked longer now, crowded together in his gums. The real Toby. "Was very loud," the boy said, his arms suddenly elongating, his fingers stretching inside his jacket pockets until the fabric tore, revealing thick yellow talons underneath. "He cried. A lot. When we took the skin." Liam let out a strangled shriek and tried to scramble backward, but he didn't see the bear thing emerging from the shadow of the trees behind him. A heavy, iron-furred paw clamped down over Liam's mouth, silencing him instantly. Tom stood alone on the rock, his knife raised, facing the thing that looked like his scout, and the things that looked like his friend and a bear. "Head count," the Toby thing whispered, stepping forward on legs that were beginning to bend slightly backward at the knee. "1." The creature lunged. 3 days later, the search and rescue teams found the abandoned camp in the Absaroka Range. They found the torn tents, the cold fire, and signs of a massive violent struggle. But no bodies. The valley was entirely empty. On the fourth afternoon, a highway patrol officer spotted a lone figure walking down the shoulder of Route 89 right at the base of the mountains. It was a teenage boy. He was wearing a shredded scout uniform, his face covered in dirt and dried blood. He was shivering violently, his eyes wide with a perfectly rehearsed expression of pure, unadulterated trauma. The officer slammed on his brakes, throwing the cruiser into park and rushing across the asphalt. "Son!" "Oh my God, son, are you okay?" the officer asked, wrapping a heavy wool blanket around the boy's shoulders. "Are you one of the missing scouts?" The boy looked up, his lips trembling, his eyes filling with tears. "They're all gone," he sobbed, his voice cracking perfectly. Something in the woods got them. I'm the only one who made it out." "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now," the officer said, guiding him gently toward the warmth of the cruiser's passenger seat. "We're going to get you home. What's your name?" "Toby," the boy whispered. Stepping into the car, as the officer walked around to the driver's side, Toby sat in the plush interior, his crying instantly stopping. He looked at his hands in his lap. Slowly, beneath the blanket, his knuckles cracked and shifted, the bone density humped and altered under the pale skin, adjusting to the tight fit of the boy's stolen flesh. He looked into the rearview mirror, his pupils dilating until his eyes were a solid, predatory yellow, and smiled a wide, flawless, human smile.